Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of your questions that you guys want to know. Earlier this morning, I actually posted on social media, Facebook, Twitter, what questions you guys have so that we could sit down and actually take the time to answer them all here on video. And so with that said, let's go ahead and start diving into your questions. So the first one, Alexander is asking about any updates on the upcoming firmware for the Redline 360c. Good news, there's an update that's going to be coming out tomorrow that's going to be fixing most of the issues that we've been seeing. Escort says that they're going to be improving the ramp up, the rear detection, the arrow functionality. They're finally going to be adding auto JTK support for the ZR5 and ZW5, etc. There's quite a few changes that are coming out here. And again, this firmware update should actually be coming out tomorrow, Tuesday morning, which is great news. So I'll definitely be loading it up and we'll do some testing to see if everything is finally actually working properly. There are some additional things that I've been seeing in the meantime, things like I've actually had the detector twice now change its settings on its own, maybe enabling pop detection or even disabling some of the Ka-band segments that I had set and preventing me from actually detecting legitimate police radar. I'm not actually sure why that's happening, but that's something else that needs to be fixed. And so given that Escort is like really working on this stuff now, thank goodness, I'm really happy to see that things are moving in the right direction here. And so again, once that comes out, everybody's going to update, I'm sure, and we'll get to see if the stuff starts to actually work better. Now, on a related note, we actually have now some of the management from Cedar Electronics, the parent company of both Escort and Cobra, who have recently joined RDF. You'll see that we've actually got now Miss Gail Babbitt, who is the CEO of Cedar, as well as Joe Sherbandy, the product manager for radar detectors for Cedar, as well as John Kuhn, who is their chief technology officer. And I'm really hopeful now that we're going to have better communication and dialogue from Escort's management along with their customers, just enthusiasts, the people who are like really passionate about this kind of stuff. So I'm hopeful that that leads to some really positive changes as well. So good news here from the Escort front. Now, the next question, Meh, is asking if there's any other information on the Max 3. Not really. From the information I had, it was supposed to be announced at the end of last month. That didn't happen. I don't know if it was a different date that was scheduled or maybe something with the Redline 360c's launch, wanting to maybe change things as far as when they release the Max 3. But yeah, it's essentially a $400 Max 2 with a new case, the Easy Mag mount, and a new design and stuff. I posted some information on my website about that too. But yeah, once it comes out, I'll pick one up and we'll do a quick hands-on just to take a look at it and see if there's any other differences between the new case and mount. But other than that, it looks like, to the best of our knowledge so far, it's a $400 repackaged Max 2, essentially. Next, I've got a follow-up question from Sky1, who's asking about the Rocky Mountain Radar Judge 2.0 that I posted a video of recently. Sky1 was actually asking how's the range on the Rocky Mountain Radar Judge 2.0. Well, I actually sent my Judge out right after doing the video over to Variable Wave on RDF, who's actually tested that detector alongside a bunch of other detectors. He did a quick test with 34.7 and found that the Judge 2.0 alerted pretty much worse than any of the other detectors that he tested. It gave the worst range possible. And then to put that into context, as you can see, it alerted right before the kill zone, and basically right before the officer could get the speed of the moving vehicle, that was when the detector went off. So it provided very little to no actual real advanced warning. The adaptive TPX, the motorcycle radar detector, alerted just a little bit earlier, followed by the unit in DFR 7 and 9, which did better, and then followed by, well, the unit in R3, which of course alerted much farther away still, which is to be expected. And so the Judge, for $400, it's a really poorly performing radar detector that doesn't offer any scrambling capabilities, no GPS, lacks a lot of the bells and whistles, not to mention apparently now the performance too. So it's just not a detector that I recommend, but yeah, that's the answer to the question. Performance apparently sucks. Now, the next question is from Monas Brewer, saying he's got an R7 and he wants some updates as far as any rumors for the next software update and whatnot. Uniden is continuing to work as far as new updates and stuff behind the scenes. DC Fluid on RDF sent one of his R7s out for repair, and they updated it with kind of now a beta version of firmware 1.32 for the R7. Now, 1.32, it's even been developed since what he had with his version, but there's a lot of changes with the detector. I'll post a link down in the video description so you can go over all of it. But yeah, there's updates to the BSM filtering, the way K-band functions. There's a lot of changes here coming in. Now, he actually found some things that we also saw when we were beta testing, some K-band delays that need to be worked out and have actually been improved since. But yeah, it's still a work in progress, and they're wanting to actually work on some K-band stuff, MRCD, and a bunch of other things as well. Now, as far as when that update comes out, I don't know. I guess just whenever Uniden decides it's ready. They're still working on it, but once it's ready, they'll release it then. Now, as maybe a follow-up to that, a number of you, John and Joseph, were asking about more Unit and R7 stuff, including updates for auto lockouts. That's a popular question. It looks like Escort's patents on that have recently expired, I think actually last month. There's been a lot of discussion with maybe additional patents or patents being extended and all this kind of stuff. From what I can tell with companies, they want to remain really tight-lipped about anything that has legal ramifications, so I'm not able to really get a ton of information about this, which sucks, but hopefully it comes out soon. I guess it remains to be seen. Once it comes out, I'll definitely keep you posted, but I don't know when, unfortunately. I don't have more information about that. Next, we've got Brandon, who's asking if the Uniden R7 can detect laser. It can, but not very well. Generally speaking, the Uniden detectors or laser sensitivity sucks, but again, doesn't really matter. Radar detectors kind of suck against laser. In the first place, that's what laser jammers are for, or even Waze. Those are much better tools than the R7, or really any radar detector when it comes to laser detection. I've got a whole video that explains why. You can just click the button up here on screen, and it goes into more information about that. Next, we've got a question from Tamika, who said she purchased a detector and doesn't know what all the frequency numbers mean. Can you explain that? Yeah, that's a great question. Different radar guns, they transmit on different frequencies. It's kind of like the stereo in your car when you're listening to different maybe FM radio stations. You can tune to 98.5 or 100.5, right? They're different stations that transmit on different frequencies. Now, detectors can scan for a pretty wide range of frequencies, but police radar guns only really transmit and operate within small sections of all of Ka band. We've got MPH brand radar guns, which transmit around 33.8 gigahertz. Stalker transmits around 34.7 gigahertz. And then you've got Decatur and Custom Signals, which both transmit around 35.5 gigahertz. And now why that's useful is if your detector alerts to maybe 33.8 as opposed to 34.7, you know, okay, that's an MPH brand gun. And just based in your experience, you may know that, okay, maybe that's this particular department. For me, that would be the Washington State Patrol, who is generally on the highway. So if I'm picking up 33.8, but I'm driving on city streets, chances are that's maybe an alert on the highway nearby. Or if I'm picking up 34.7 in a certain area, I'm like, well, I know the local city police department likes to transmit on 34.7, but they're never really operating on the highways. So that can give me a little bit more information as far as what department is being used, and then if I know some information about that department, that gives me a little bit more information than just, well, it's Ka band nearby somewhere. So that can be really useful. There's also things where if you know maybe some of the nuances of the radar guns or their limitations, that kind of tells you what the officer's capabilities are. If you look at the exact frequency of the radar gun, they may transmit on slightly different frequencies. And so let's say there's a 34.7 signal that you pick up, and you pick up 34.650. And then, shortly after, you pick up 34.750. It's 100 megahertz higher. That tells you that it's a different antenna that's transmitting, which could be maybe a completely different police officer altogether. Maybe you picked up one, you passed it, and now there's another one up ahead. Additionally, it could also be things like maybe the officer's front antenna is transmitting at one frequency, and then he just switched to his rear antenna. And there's my dog barking. And they transmit on different frequencies, and it tells you that the officer's transmitting maybe in both directions. That information can also be useful when you're doing some advanced stuff like custom sweeps or band segmentation and turning off certain frequency ranges to potentially get a little bit better performance. Sometimes you'll find radar guns that can transmit on really odd frequency ranges. It's something that's maybe more common in New York. I see some here up in kind of northern Seattle as well as down in Pierce County. So depending on as you drive around, you get a better sense of maybe how to fine-tune your detector to maximize the performance or cut out some false alerts that maybe you'll see on Ka band from maybe a satellite dish on somebody's house or a leaky radar detector that can cause your radar detector to false alert. Knowing some of those nuances just gives you more information on just kind of what's going on around you and how you can customize your detector. And again, just better understand what's going on around you. On K-band, it's a little bit trickier because there's a lot more overlap between both legitimate and false alert frequencies. So you can do some stuff with paying attention to the frequency range, but there's also going to be a fair amount of overlap between that frequency 24.124, for example. It's very likely going to be a Mazda nearby, but that's right exactly where a lot of K-band radar guns are designed to operate as well. So there's not as much you can do with kind of turning on and off different frequency ranges, but you can still get a little bit more information on K-band a lot of times just by looking at the frequency. So it's kind of an advanced feature, but that's actually what we're doing with it. Now, the next question comes from Dalmir. He's asking about Stinger versus ALP. Decision there for laser jammer if price is not an issue. In general, I recommend the ALP. It's the way to go. The Stinger also did great. It's about twice the price of the ALP, and if you want really, really tiny laser jammer heads, that's a great option. My main concern about the Stinger, though, is going to be their long-term updates. Historically, they just haven't done a really good job with that. Versus ALP has done a great job, even with existing hardware, not forcing you to upgrade new hardware to get better performance. And so I find the long-term support with ALP just to be better. And they've kind of established their track record of history and updates. And so I have a lot more confidence, spending the money to install and keep it there. It's not easy to switch systems. So ALP just gives me more confidence. But if you want the smaller heads and you're okay with paying twice the money and maybe taking a little bit of risk, we'll have to see kind of how they handle updates, I think the Stingers are a good option as well. The next question comes from Lawrence. He's asking about new police speed equipment. It doesn't come out often, but when they do, can you give us a rundown on it? And yeah, you're right. Police radar and laser guns, they're not really updated all that often. We get a lot more radar detectors than police get new radar guns. Maybe one of the newest ones we can talk about is the Detector Genesis 3. It's essentially an updated version of the Detector Genesis 2 Select. Similar idea, also transmits on 35.5. There's some difference to the police officer side. Things like it's a little bit smaller now. The remote control has been redesigned. The face of the antenna is actually now black instead of white, so something to keep an eye out for. If you maybe notice 35.5 and you see the antenna on the officer's car, maybe that's one little difference to keep an eye out for. But otherwise, it's the same antenna, it's the same functionality, so there's not really any difference to us as radar detector users, but that's actually one of the new things that police officers have gotten on the radar side. Now, on a similar note, Rob has been asking about the proliferation of speed cameras. What's the status regarding those and kind of effective countermeasures? That's kind of a tricky thing to answer because things are so different all over the country, and I think this is actually a situation where, kind of like Waze, it's great when we have a lot of people all kind of reporting the information about what we're seeing locally. I can tell you that here in Seattle, we've got some speed cameras, but they don't actually transmit radar or laser at all. They are speed cameras that are made by ATS, American Traffic Solutions, and they have these special induction loops in the ground, and that's actually tracking your speed, and that's what it uses to measure your speed, and then the cameras take a picture and send you a ticket if you're speeding. And because they're using these induction loops in the ground, there's no radar, there's no laser, there's nothing for your radar detector to pick up on and warn you. But because they're fixed, anything like Waze or a radar detector with GPS, and just notification of speed cameras, those can alert you to those no problem. Now that said, there's a lot of different manufacturers, there's a lot of different technology. There's a lot of them that actually do transmit radar. Some of them are easier to pick up than others. You've got the Multiradar C, the Multiradar CD, the Multiradar CT, GATSO, you've got the RT2, RT3, RT4, you've got the different Redflex systems. There's many, many different manufacturers, and some of them are easier to detect than others. A lot of this stuff, we're actually dependent on people who have those systems in their area. I drove out to Edmonton a couple years ago to go test out some of the MRCD stuff, but a lot of that has just been people who live there and have very easy access to that. A lot of times you'll find maybe one detector can do better against one photo radar gun, or maybe even one specific firmware version may work better than an older one or a newer one, or certain settings are really necessary. And so that's the kind of stuff where it's anything that's pretty locally dependent, where I think we're really best suited to having people, the whole community, all come together and like, hey, these are the guns that I have in my area. These are the detectors that work best against them. Use this firmware, use these settings. And it's just kind of a group collaborative effort. So if that's something that you're interested in helping out with, yeah, let people know. Maybe hop on the forums and just be like, I live here. Here's the laws for photo radar systems. Sometimes they're installing them. Sometimes they then get banned and then they start pulling them out. Some places actually have to have them marked, like here they do before you approach. So you get the warning even if you don't have a radar detector. So, things definitely vary everywhere you go. So that's the type of thing that, yeah, there's a lot of them out there. And they use very different systems. And so if you could do a little bit of research and maybe post that on the forums, that's something to where we can have a place to where we compile all the information and then everybody can go out and learn from that. I mean, I take a lot of the information that I learned from you guys and just share it here on YouTube as well. It's not like I know everything myself by any means. Now, for the next question, question from Darcy. If you were traveling across the states, what's your go-to detector and laser defense? That's an interesting question. I guess it's two different ways to answer that question. If there was one I was depending on right now, I'd probably say maybe the V1 Gen 2 or the Maxi-I 360 for windshield mount and custom installed. Assuming I don't need like multi-radar detection, for example. If I'm just doing a cross-country road trip, those are used mostly in the cities. I would pick something like the V1 Gen 2. And I like that because an app like JBV1, I can pre-program in the app the settings that I want for different areas. And as I drive through different areas, it just turns on and off the different settings that I need, the different bands, different filters, that kind of stuff. So I can just drive and my detector takes care of all that kind of stuff for me. Plus it's got good performance, it's got arrows, it's got good BSM filtering. The aircraft enforcement, we have that stuff here in Washington. It could tell me weather information, a lot of that kind of stuff. In addition to just the radar detection, I find that package to be really useful. So I really like that. Now, that said, at the same time, I love testing lots of different detectors. And part of the fun for me is seeing how they all compare. So a lot of times on road trips, I'll grab a handful of detectors and I'll run one for a couple hours. I'll throw another one on maybe the next day or something. And I like kind of getting a sense of, okay, maybe this one is better at the BSM filtering or whatever. So I wouldn't necessarily just choose one detector. Personally, I would like having a lot of different detectors, but I know the question is what's the best detector typically is what that boils down to, and which one should I get. So I personally, I think, would lean to the maybe the V1 Gen 2 kind of pre-programmed with JBV1 ahead of time. And oh, you were asking about laser defense? ALP. Just best laser jammer. Simple. It's the most effective against all the different laser guns that you'll find across the country. So yeah, get the ALP. And then finally, Scott was asking about JBV1 as well. He was asking if I'm still doing a setup video for JBV1. I am. I actually have my part of the video completely done. It is a 3-part video series going over everything about JBV1. Well, not technically everything. It's actually a collaboration with another person who's, well, he's actually going to be covering everything about it. He's got a really big, huge thing that he's working on. And once he finishes his portion, then he's going to release that and I'm going to release my version. So I actually have finished my JBV1 tutorial. I could actually go ahead and release it, but I'm waiting for the final stuff to be ready and then we're all going to release it together. So yeah, I'm definitely working on a tutorial for JBV1 that's coming as soon as E2S2R on RDF kind of finishes his massive tutorial that he's working on. So yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Ask Vortex. If you like this, let me know and maybe ask some additional questions down in the comment area. Maybe we'll do another video like this as well. So awesome. Thanks for watching. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you in the next video.